This is your daily reminder. God has not run out of mercy, not for you, not today. Welcome to the New Mercies Podcast. Welcome. Today is Thursday, August the 20th, and I hope and pray you are reading along with us. Today, our reading plan takes us to Isaiah chapter 6. Isaiah chapter 6. I absolutely love Isaiah chapter 6. Let me give you just a little bit of my passion about the text, and then we can talk about it, and I can help maybe guide in how to read this text to get the most out of it for today. Isaiah 6 is the text in my life, if I had to point to one, that was instrumental in the majority of my life. Now, this doesn't mean my life verse is not found within Isaiah 6. My life verse is Micah 6:8 that says, "He has shown you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you? Do justly, love mercy, walk humbly with your God." Meaning that's the filter that I try to run every single decision through, and any behavior or anything that I'm going to do, I try to run through Micah 6:8. But Isaiah chapter 6 is the place. There was a summer that I was a summer missionary. And while I was a summer missionary, we prepared a service for a bunch of teenagers. There were hundreds of teenagers that came out to Fort Worth, Texas, or actually Dallas, Texas at the time. And I was in charge of helping put together a worship service. And in that worship service, we dealt with Isaiah chapter 6. And it was that night in the Dallas Theological Seminary, back in the chapel of the seminary. We were having a worship service. I was standing in the back. We had prepared and planned and done all kinds of things to help these students to experience God in this great summer event. And it was that text that spoke to me that night. And here I was supposed to be the one planning the service, right? I wasn't supposed to get something out of this. I was supposed to help others get something out of this. And the Lord called me into full-time ministry. He called me to minister to the church, to serve the church as a minister of the gospel. It was that night that God just slapped me in the head and said, "Hey, I want you to do this. That's what I want you to do." So this text has a very special place in my heart, and from that moment, it's always kind of been a spiritual marker in my life. And I will say I've preached this text a lot. It's going to be really hard for me to move past all of my former notes and all of my things that I've done. If you have been at my church very long, I preached this text a few years ago, and I did what I understand, what I know. Here's what I will say. I got more out of it today as I was reading. That's the way the Lord does things, right? He helps us see more and more and more. So here's what I want to do. I want to give you the breakdown, and then I'm going to be yapping for a minute because I love this text so much. So here's what I'll say. Break this up into 4 sections today. These 13 verses, we're going to break it up in 4 ways. Verses 1 through 4, I've titled Revelation. It is God revealed. Verse number 5, I've titled Confession. It is sin exposed in verse 5. Verses 6 and 7, I titled Cleansing. This is guilt removed, all right? Then verses 8 through 13, I've titled Commissioning, which is a life surrendered. So you got revelation, confession, cleansing, and commissioning. That's the way this is broken up today. Now, here's what I want to do. I want to go ahead and share a little bit from the Word because it is so, so good. This text begins in the year King Uzziah died. King Uzziah, there was a lot of health, a lot of prosperity, a lot of good things going on in Uzziah's reign. Now, Uzziah ended up, some bad situations happened with him. Pride got the end of him. But there were some things that happened in his life. But ultimately, there was a stability in the nation while King Uzziah was on the throne. King Uzziah dies, which symbolizes, or it is beginning to trigger instability and stress and anxiety and worry and, oh no, what if we get attacked? There was peace under his reign. What if we get attacked now that our nation is vulnerable? Well, in the year King Uzziah died, Isaiah sees that there is a throne that is still occupied. He sees the throne of God. When he sees the throne, it says he sees the Lord high and exalted, lifted up. And it says that the train of his robe filled the temple. Now, if you've heard me preach this text before in the last couple of years, you know what I'm about to say. I don't have it written down in my notes, but I want to share this because it's just so cool. In the year King Uzziah died, so the king on earth is dead. God is not. He's still on the throne. That throne is occupied, and no one is going after that throne. No one. You can't get to that throne. It's holy, it's perfect, it's pure. But it says that as Isaiah is experiencing this, he's seeing this, it says the train of God's robe is filling the temple. Now, first off, this is a heavenly temple, not an earthly temple. It's probably pretty massive. But the train of the robe matters for a king, because what that symbolized was victory. So what would happen is two kings would go to battle, right? And so one king would represent his nation and his land and his property, and this other king would represent his nation, his land, his kingdom. They would battle. When they would battle, the losing king would have his train of his robe cut off, and that would be sewn onto the back of the other king, the victory king. And that represented something. It represented now this king that is walking has got behind him all the places he has authority. So he has authority not only in his kingdom, but also the kingdom he defeated. Now he's got victory in both kingdoms, right? So then what would happen is that king may go to another kingdom and they may battle again. And if this king wins again, then the loser king cuts off the train of his robe, sews it on the back of the victory king. The victory king now has authority in that area, and he walked around and showed that and displayed that. Each kingdom would have their own colors, kind of like nations have flags. Our flags all have different colors on them. And it's the same thing would happen in this day and age. There would be a king that would have a color on his kingdom. Their nation would have some color that symbolized some value or who they were, represented who they were. And so the back of a victory king's robe would be very colorful. It'd be very designed and very beautiful. But what it would do is it would symbolize that king has authority in all of these kingdoms. Now, I'll tell you this. Our king, who is seated on the throne, has authority in every single kingdom. Whatever battle you're going up against, it's already sewn on the back of our king's robe. He's already defeated it. I know that because it says the train of his robe filled the temple in Isaiah's day. He already defeated. Death is a kingdom, and it is sewn on the back of our king's robe. Sin is a kingdom. It's sewn on the back of our king's robe. How did he do it? By sending his son, by dying for us. He's the victory king. He doesn't lose a battle. Anxiety, that stress, that depression that you're facing, that overwhelming sense of inadequacy, that overwhelming sense of gossip or whatever it is, those kingdoms are all sewn on the back of our king's robe. I carry a little thing in my briefcase. I carry a little piece of fabric in there, and that piece of fabric reminds me that whatever I'm struggling with, I'll pull that piece of fabric out and I'll look at it, and I'll think, this is that battle that I'm facing, and it's already sewn on the back of my king's robe. When Isaiah sees this, it is a sight to behold. But there's more than just the sight to behold. There is way more with that. It says, as he sees the train of his robe filling the temple, then he sees above him, above the Lord, are seraphim flying. Seraphim are fiery angels, red-hot angels. Now, just to make sure we understand this too, the posture of this king is seated on the throne. He's not standing up, marching around, stressed out, trying to figure out, what am I going to do now? Uzziah's died. Oh no, what can I do for the nation? The nation may be in trouble. He's not pacing the floors. He is seated, a seat of authority. Train of his robe filling the temple. Above him are seraphim, these fiery hot angels flying around. And as they're flying around, they're covering their face because they can't even look at his holiness. This is how powerful and amazing this is. Then we find what they are saying to one another. It says that one of them is calling to the other. In verse 3, holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. That's what he's saying. These angels are shouting to one another. Now, I told you, I get more out of the scripture every time I read it. Even this text that I've dissected for years. I have studied so much of this text, and yet today something new popped out. That word for holy is the Hebrew word kadosh. Kadosh. That word kadosh means set apart. It means completely other. Okay, completely other, or morally flawless. Morally flawless. It also means in the Hebrew, kadosh means utterly unlike his creation. He is so much holier than anything we can imagine. He is very different from his creation. Now, we're made in his image, but he is perfectly holy. And here's the deal. In the Hebrew terms, in Hebrew literature, if something was ever repeated once, it was to build intensification, like a multiplication effect. So if they were to say holy, holy, it would mean utterly, morally flawless, utterly perfect in every single way, multiplied by itself. But this time it said 3 times, holy, holy, holy. This is the Hebrew intensifying this term. So he's so much more holy than we could ever imagine. In fact, his holiness is producing a worship that's happening in heaven as these angels are shouting to one another how holy he is. They're shouting so much that it says the foundations shook in the temple and the threshold shook. Now, this is where really, really awesome stuff here. I did some research years ago. I don't even have these stats in front of me, but I do remember a few things. The threshold shook in the temple. It says, and then the house was filled with smoke. I looked up at the sound of these angels' voices, the threshold shook. The sound of their voices shook the thresholds. So I did what every, regular person does. I went and did a decibel chart. I said, okay, decibels are how loud sound is, right? The higher the decibel, the louder the sound. So I began to think, okay, what are the effects of different decibel levels to earthquake type? So a foundation or a threshold in a house has a frame around it, right? A threshold, if you walk through a door frame, there's a threshold underneath it. That threshold is supposed to be the most stable place in the whole house. So for instance, if there's ever been an earthquake that goes on, a safe place to stand would be in a doorway because it can hold the most, because it's usually got a header over top of it and it's a little bit more stable. And the threshold specifically is supposed to be one of the strongest points in the house. I'm imagining the threshold in heaven's temple is probably a pretty strong place. That threshold is shaking. Do you know how many decibels it takes to actually shake a threshold? Now, this isn't just I feel the vibration in my chest. This is an actual earthquake on a threshold. So I did some research and I looked it up. I was going to pull all these stats up, but I'm just going to shoot from the hip today because I know these stats are out there. So here's what it takes. In order for a decibel level to rise loud enough to shake a threshold, I had all these like what the decibel is and how much it is and all those things. The decibel level to blow your eardrums out is at a certain number. Well, you have to go louder than that in order to shake a threshold. So your eardrums are already blown out. Okay, so Isaiah is in the presence of God, and the sound of the angels' voices should have blown his eardrums out. But there's something even bigger than that. It's not just a volume that blows the eardrums out. In fact, if you keep raising the decibel level and you keep going up higher and higher, there is a point where breathing becomes impossible. Your lungs will collapse. That's right. There's a decibel level that it's at that level, the sound waves that are vibrating you will shut down your lungs. There's another level of sound waves that they will shut down not only your lungs, but every organ in your body. And then it's further than that actually shakes a threshold. What that tells me is the praise to the holy, holy, holy God in heaven, in his throne room right now, that praise, we in our mortal bodies can't even stand in that presence. I've told you before, I think we grossly underestimate the holiness and the power and the authority and the beauty and the majesty and the raw power of God. We grossly underestimate it. These angels are shouting, and Isaiah can't even actually stand there. If the same laws work, and that is that decibel level, if that's able to shake the threshold, it is so loud it should collapse his body and he should not be able to be alive. That should happen. That's how powerful this worship is. And the temple fills with smoke. There was more about the smoke, but I gotta keep moving. I mean, I'm already way too far behind. I'm so sorry. I'm not even sorry. Deal with it. Then what happens after Isaiah sees this, a couple verses in, it says that he said in verse 5, he says, "Woe is me." Right? There's this confession. Once God is revealed, let me tell you something that happens next. Woe is me. Right? Woe is me. I am unclean. I'm a man of unclean lips. I live among, I should not be here. That's what Isaiah is saying. I love the first 4 verses. We don't realize Isaiah's in the room. Right? We don't even realize it. It's like I saw the Lord seated on, he's high, up here, way up. Then I saw these seraphim, these angels. They're yelling to red hot, fiery angels. They're 2 covering their faces, covering their feet, flying around. They're shouting to one another how holy this God is. The whole earth is full of his glory. We all see his glory from this heavenly perspective. The sound of their voices, everything. There's an earthquake happening. Isaiah should have died. We see this massive scene. We hear this massive scene. We see and we feel the smoke is that feeling of this his presence is overwhelming. And then Isaiah says, oh my goodness, I shouldn't be here. This is not for, I am in the wrong place at the wrong time. I should not be in his presence. Woe is me. Then what happens if you keep reading? Something amazing. This same guy that says, woe is me, I shouldn't be here, is the same guy just a couple of lines later says, Here I am, send me. First he said, woe is me, I shouldn't be here. Then he says, here I am, send me. What happened? What changed? Well, he confessed his sin. After his confession happened, there was a cleansing. God cleansed him. He cleaned him up. And in that moment, his guilt was removed. Once his guilt was removed, he said, now I'm ready to go do anything. Can I tell you this? We as believers have had our guilt removed, our shame removed by Jesus on the cross and the crucifixion, and then how he rose again from the dead. We live on the other side of resurrection. We live in this cleansing power of Jesus, and we have the ability now to say, here I am, send me. Whatever you say, wherever I go, wherever you want me to go, I'll go. That's what I will do. After he's cleansed, his guilt is free, then he gets commissioned. That commissioning, I love. We typically stop at verse number 8. Because we say, here am I, send me. And then that's usually where it stops. Well, then verses 9 through 13, God says this, you're going to go and you're going to be my voice. You're going to be my lips. I'm going to tell people what's going on, but they're not going to listen to you. He calls him to the worst mission trip ever. He's like, nobody's going to listen. Everybody's going to hate you. It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard. You're not really going to see it, but you're faithful to me. That's what matters. And Isaiah doesn't even complain. You're saying I get to go be your mouthpiece. I don't care if anybody listens to me or not. If I get to be your mouthpiece, if I get to be used by you, the God on the throne, the King of Kings, Lord of Lords, here's what I will say, and I will say it 100,000 times. You may say, I don't want to share my faith because what if people make fun of me? You get to share the faith of the God who is on the throne, and you're going to be worried that somebody's not going to listen to you, or somebody's going to make fun of you, or somebody's going to get over yourself. Go look at the throne again. Go look at him once again. I told you as I was studying and this past week, I began to share with you a little bit on my listeners here how I study the Bible, right? First question I ask after I read the text, after I do the SOAP method and all that stuff, I ask the question, what does this text reveal about God? Well, we see a lot of that, right? Go look at the first 4 verses again. A lot we see about God. How holy, how perfect, how amazing, how incredible, how strong, how his worship, even the worship of him, we can't even handle. Some people say it's too loud in church. You're going to be miserable in heaven because it's going to be loud. It's going to be good. Now, you'll have a new body that'll be able to handle the loud, but anyway, I digress. So what does it reveal about God? I hope we see that and hope we know that. What does this reveal about me? We're unclean, right? We saw that right there in the text. We are unclean. How does this affect my prayer life? I'll tell you, when I think about the God on the throne and my prayer life gets affected, it gets changed, it gets developed. How does this affect your prayer life? How does this text affect your prayer life today? It may be reading the whole text, or reading those last few verses especially, your prayer life may be, God, I'm not going to pray for the outcome anymore. I'm going to pray for the input. For whatever you're putting in me, that's what I'm going to pray for. I'm not going to pray for the results. The results are up to God. They're not up to you. Never been up to you. So leave those up to you. So here's what I do. So those are the first 3 questions, right? What does this reveal about God? What does it reveal about me? And how's this going to affect my prayer life? Now I'm going to give you the 4th one today. There's one more. We'll talk about it tomorrow. The 4th one, though, is this. And this is maybe the part that hinges, that starts to change your Bible study. I know it changes my Bible study time. Here's the question I ask. How would I share this with someone? How would I share this with someone? One of the things that I think is a good thing about my ministry, but also part of the reasons I'm unique is because I'm not very smart, not very intelligent. So my goal is I want to be able to share this with somebody, right? So I will read this text and I will ask these questions. What does this reveal about God? That's the first question. If I can just get that, right, then I'll understand a little bit more. What does it reveal about me? How does this affect my prayer life? And now, how would I share this with somebody? So then what I'll do is I'll typically write out, how would I share this with somebody in an elevator? How would I share this with somebody at the gas pump? How would I share this with somebody that is a family member or somebody how would I text this information to somebody? What would I say? How would I share this text? And, honestly, there's 1,000 ways to do this. Today, here's how I would share this text. This God that I serve is so incredible. He's so holy. He's so mighty. And I can't do anything on my own. I have to have him. I have to. Why would I try to do it on my own whenever I realize how powerful and how holy he is? I would share it by starting out talking about how great God is. I'd say, man, he's sitting on the throne. Even the difficulties we face in life, he's in control. He's in control. I know it because that's where he is. Isaiah got to experience that. He got to see God seated on the throne. And then I would say, and then once he realized how great he was, he then saw how bad he was. He saw how great God is, saw how terrible Isaiah is, right? Which is what happens with us. I would explain it that way. And then I would start to share and say, and then there's this moment where God says, I want to call you to something. I want to forgive you and cleanse you, and then I want to call you to work with me. That's how I'd share this. And then say, the mission trip is kind of tough. I mean, that's kind of what I do every day on the podcast, right? I'm sharing what I'm learning. I'm sharing some about the text. That's one of the questions that I ask. And it takes a little bit of time. This is probably the part that takes the most time for me. How would I share this with someone? Because here's what I will do sometimes. I will say, how would I share this with an adult, with a 75 or 85-year-old person? And how would I share it with a 40-year-old person? How would I share this with a 6-year-old? How would I share this with a teenager? How would I share? And I began to write down and see and that's part of what I do as a pastor, but I think it's what we're all supposed to do. We're all supposed to share what God's doing in our life. We're supposed to share the text. I want to encourage you today, when you read Isaiah 6, see what the Lord would say to you and ask those questions, right? What does this reveal about God? What does it reveal about me? How does it affect my prayer life? And then how would you share this with somebody else? Maybe take a minute and write it down. Maybe send a text message to somebody and have it written in there. Hey, I just read Isaiah 6. This is awesome. God's seated on the throne, even in the darkest time, and Isaiah sees him and hears and experiences him, and then God forgives Isaiah, and then he calls him to something great. Maybe that's as simple as you need to do it. Maybe you need to find out how can you teach this to your kid? How can you share this with your dad and your mom? How can you share this with somebody around you? That's part of what your pastor does whenever I read the text. And I'll tell you, it's been a great lesson for me. It's been a great help for me to be able to understand the scripture on a better level so that I am able to not only retain it and just listen to it, but also share it with others. Read Isaiah 6 today and see if the Lord won't change your perspective.